Okay, picture this. You're standing there, right? You've put in the hours, practiced the techniques, but now it's exam time, that practical exam.
Mm-hmm. The moment of truth.
Exactly. And the examiner, they point to a spot, or maybe they ask you, locate the posterior triangle,
Hmm.
and your mind just starts racing, doesn't it?
Totally. What's the site name? What structures? What exactly do I need to say right there?
That feeling, that pressure, it's real. And look, being able to confidently name that specific spot exactly as it's listed in your source material.
Huh?
And even more critically, listing those specific structures the source tells you to be cautious of in that exact spot. That's what stands between you and, well, passing that part of the exam.
Absolutely. That moment, it requires more than just a general grasp of anatomy.
Yeah.
It needs really specific recall. Information tied directly to these designated cautionary sites. The practical exam is basically testing your ability to pinpoint these key areas and then just list the specific structures within them that need careful attention during a massage. It's about safety, of course, but for the exam, it's also about knowing this specific list.
Exactly. And that is precisely what this deep dive is all about today. It's custom tailored for you, the massage student getting ready for that exact situation. Our mission today, it's laser focused. We are going to dive deep into one specific source document. You know, the one that lays out these potential caution sites and the structures that go with them.
The list.
The list. We're going through it line by line, focusing only on what you absolutely need for that critical exam moment. That means the site's name, just as it appears in the source. The location cue the source provides, just to help you orient yourself.
Okay.
And the exact list of cautionary structures the source associates with that specific site. And here's the key. We are intentionally ignoring other details the source might have, like, specific border descriptions or detailed anatomy.
Right. No borders today.
Nope. Today, it's all about that perfect pairing. Site name plus the exact structure list from this document.
Think of this source document as basically the answer key for this section of your practical. It's very likely the list your examiner will be working from.
Good point.
So our goal here is to help you internalize the information from this specific document. We'll give you the site name, clarify its location based on that source cue, and then carefully go through the precise list of structures.
Right. So let's set the stage for your exam. The prompt comes maybe identify site X or show me where site Y is. Your job, based purely on this source, is to confidently point to the area, state the site name exactly as listed, and then recite the specific list of structures this document says are cautionary for that site.
That's the task.
We're going to go through each one methodically. We'll give you the site name, the location hint from the source, and then drill down into that crucial list of structures. And, we'll even talk through some of the quirks in the source's phrasing.
Oh yeah, like the spellings or punctuation sometimes.
Exactly. Because knowing exactly how it's written in the source can be really important for recall. Okay, you're ready.
Let's do it. Let's unpack this source. We'll follow the structure that's laid out in the document itself, starting with the upper body, the head and neck, and then working our way down.
Makes sense.
The head and neck area. Well, it's anatomically complex, isn't it?
Yeah.
Lots of vital structures, many quite superficial. So precise identification here is absolutely paramount for safety.
And for nailing that exam question.
And for nailing the exam, yes, recall is key.
Okay, let's start high up, back of the head. The very first site listed in our source document is the occipital region.
Occipital region.
And the source provides a location cue for this. Pretty straightforward. Occipital ridge. So think that bony ridge at the back of your skull.
Okay, now what's absolutely crucial here, and this is the pattern we'll follow, is the specific set of structures the source explicitly lists as cautionary only for this occipital region.
Right, not just any structure back there.
Exactly.
Oh, yeah.
According to this document, the structures you need to associate with the occipital region are these four. Occipital ridge itself.
Okay, the landmark is on the list.
Yep. Then the vertebral artery, the spinous process, and the greater occipital nerve. Just those four.
Okay, let's recap that. Site, occipital region, location cue, occipital ridge. And the list for that site from this source is occipital ridge, vertebral artery, spinous process, greater occipital nerve.
Spot on.
So if the examiner asks about the occipital region, you need to be ready to list these specific four. It's all about knowing exactly which structures belong to which site according to this document. That's the game here.
Precisely. Okay, moving slightly forward now and down a bit on the side of the head, right behind the jawbone. The source lists the next site as notch posterior to the ramus of mandible.
Notch posterior to the ramus of mandible. That name itself is a pretty good location cue, isn't it?
It is. The source just gives the mandible as the general cue, but the site name tells you it's that indented area, that notch right behind the angle and the sort of vertical part of the jawbone.
Got it. And here's where it gets particularly interesting and maybe a bit challenging for memorization.
Yes, this one requires some careful attention because the list of structures associated with this specific notch in the source, well, it's quite extensive.
Okay, let's hear it.
It is. This list includes several really important nerves and also some bony processes all clustered in this relatively small area.
Yeah.
So the source lists all the following cautionary structures specifically for the notch posterior to the ramus of mandible site. Ready?
Ready.
Styloid process,
Okay, bony bit.
facial nerve, trigeminal nerve,
Okay.
and then 3 specific branches listed separately: maxillary nerve, mandibular nerve, ophthalmic nerve.
Wow, the whole trigeminal breakdown basically.
This is like that, yes. And finally, the mastoid process.
Okay, let's count that. Styloid process, facial nerve, trigeminal, maxillary, mandibular, ophthalmic, mastoid process. That's 7. 7 specific structures tied to just that one notch location.
7 structures. It's a lot for one site.
Let's run through that list again, maybe a bit slower, just to let it sink in. Styloid process, facial nerve, trigeminal nerve, maxillary nerve, mandibular nerve, ophthalmic nerve, mastoid process.
Right. Now, this particular list, it does raise a question, doesn't it? Like, why did this source group these specific structures together right here?
Yeah, especially listing the main trigeminal and then its branches separately.
Exactly. And while the source document itself, it doesn't really explain the why, remember, its purpose is just to provide the list for you to memorize, knowing that these specific nerves, the facial nerve, and those 3 listed branches of the trigeminal, are listed exactly as shown here, alongside the styloid process and the mastoid process, and that they are all associated with the notch posterior to the ramus of mandible. That is the critical takeaway from this source.
Okay, so don't overthink the anatomy connections for the exam. Just know the list.
Precisely. For your exam, you must be prepared to recite all 7 of those names when you identify this specific notch. It's not good enough to know just some of them, or the main ones. The source lists these specific 7.
Right, and that really highlights the challenge and the goal for your practical exam. It's all about associating that site name with the exact list provided in this document. So practice saying it. Notch posterior to ramus of mandible equals, and then list them out.
Styloid process, facial nerve, trigeminal nerve, maxillary nerve, mandibular nerve, ophthalmic nerve, mastoid process.
Definitely a list to spend some quality time practicing reciting out loud. Maybe use flashcards for that one.
Good idea. Okay, shifting our focus now. Let's move to the front of the neck. The source lists the anterior triangle of the neck as our next cautionary site.
Anterior triangle of the neck, and the location cue provided in the source is SCM, which, for anyone needing a quick reminder, stands for the sternocleidomastoid muscle. That big, ropey muscle running diagonally across the side of your neck, from behind the ear down towards the collarbone.
Right.
So the anterior triangle is that area generally in front of that SCM muscle.
Okay, let's unpack the cautionary structures, the source lists for the anterior triangle of the neck. What have we got?
For this site, the source lists carotid artery,
Big one.
thyroid gland,
Mm-hmm.
trachea,
Airway.
vagus nerve,
Okay.
and the internal jugular vein. 5 structures in total.
5 structures. Okay, so the source groups several major things here, which makes sense for the front of the neck. You've got the major vessels, the carotid artery, and the internal jugular vein.
Yeah.
You got vital structures like the thyroid gland and the trachea, and that really important nerve, the vagus nerve.
And the source explicitly links these 5 specific structures to the anterior triangle of the neck site. Got it. So when you think or hear anterior triangle of the neck, the list you need to have ready, straight from this source, is carotid artery, thyroid gland, trachea, vagus nerve, internal jugular vein. Practice reciting those 5 names confidently for this site.
Exactly. Now, this next one's kind of interesting in how it's listed. The source lists the mandible itself.
The jawbone.
The jawbone itself, yeah. Listed as a cautionary site name, not just an area around it, like the notch we discussed earlier.
Ah.
And the location cue given in the source is simply mandible.
Feels a bit counterintuitive at first, doesn't it? The bone itself being the site of caution. But okay, the source is specific, so what's the list? What are the cautionary structures associated specifically with the mandible site, according to this document?
It's a shorter list the source gives us. hyoid bone.
Okay, the little floating bone higher up.
Yep, then the trachea again.
Trachea again, interesting. It was in the interior triangle list too.
It was. And finally, lymph nodes.
Okay, so hyoid bone, trachea, lymph nodes, just 3.
Just 3. And what's fascinating here, or at least noteworthy for exam prep, is that the source specifically calls out the hyoid bone, the trachea, and lymph nodes under the mandible site name.
Right.
It highlights these very particular structures in relation to this specific site listing.
Mm-hmm.
So for your exam, if the prompt happens to be the mandible site, this is the short, specific list you need to recall from this source. It's definitely not an exhaustive list of everything near the mandible.
No, clearly.
But it's the exact list provided in this document for this site name.
Okay, simple site name, specific list. Got it. For the mandible site, the source gives us hyoid bone, trachea, lymph nodes. Just those 3 names to associate with that particular site listing. Easy to overlook, maybe, but important to know this specific grouping exists in the source.
Definitely. Okay, let's move around to the back of the neck now. The source lists the posterior triangle of the neck.
Posterior triangle of the neck. And the location cues listed are SCM, again, and TVPs.
TVPs.
Right.
So that area behind the sternocleidomastoid muscle. And TVPs, as you probably know, stands for transverse processes, those bony projections sticking out sideways from the vertebrae in your neck.
Right. So this site is basically the area behind the SCM, roughly where you'd feel those transverse processes. Okay, what's the list for the posterior triangle of the neck? What cautionary structures does the source give us here?
For the posterior triangle of the neck, the source lists the following. Brachial plexus.
Ah, the big nerve network for the arm.
That's the one. Then subclavian artery,
Okay.
external jugular vein, subclavian vein,
Artery and vein, got it.
lymph nodes again.
Lymph nodes popping up again. They were on the mandible list too,
They were. And finally, the vertebral artery again.
vertebral artery. That was on the occipital region list, wasn't it?
It was indeed. So some structures appear on multiple lists, which is important to note. The key is knowing the complete and specific list for each site.
Okay, so for the posterior triangle, that's 6 structures total. Let's see. Brachial plexus, subclavian artery, external jugular vein, subclavian vein, lymph nodes, vertebral artery.
That's the list.
Yeah.
6 structures. And if we, connect this back to the bigger picture just for understanding, comparing the lists for the anterior and posterior triangles in this source shows really distinct sets of key structures listed for each.
Yeah, different vessels, different nerves predominantly.
Exactly. Well, lymph nodes are on the mandible and posterior triangle lists, and the vertebral artery is on the occipital and posterior triangle lists. The posterior triangle list specifically includes the entire brachial plexus and the subclavian vessels, both artery and vein, plus the external jugular vein.
Right.
The absolute critical point for your exam is simply knowing which specific list belongs to which triangle site according to this document.
Got it. So practice associating that list firmly with the posterior triangle of the neck. Brachial plexus, subclavian artery, external jugular vein, subclavian vein, lymph nodes, vertebral artery. Knowing which vessels and nerves are listed for the front versus the back of the neck triangles, based on this source, is a key distinction to practice.
Precisely. Okay, I think that covers the head and neck region sites listed in the source. Shall we move down to the trunk?
Let's do it. Moving down into the torso region. What's first?
We'll cover some essential sites in the torso, starting sort of laterally and up high, around the shoulder joint area.
Okay.
First up in the trunk section of the source is the axilla.
Axilla, the armpit.
That's right, the armpit area. And the source provides quite a few location cues, actually. Lats, teres major, pec major and minor, brachialis, and triceps.
Ah, so listing the muscles that basically form the walls of the armpit, that gives you a really clear idea of the physical space we're talking about.
Exactly. And as you'd guess, the axilla is a really crucial passageway, isn't it? For nerves and vessels traveling between the neck and trunk out into the arm.
Definitely a busy junction.
It is. So according to our source document, the cautionary structures listed specifically for the axilla site are brachial plexus.
There it is again. Was in the posterior triangle list too.
Correct. It makes anatomical sense as the plexus passes right through here. But for the axilla site specifically, the source pairs it with the axillary nerve, the axillary artery, and the axillary vein.
Okay, so the specifically named axillary structures.
Yes. And then, once again, lymph nodes.
Lymph nodes seem to be a common theme in these junctional areas.
They often are. So the source lists these 5 specific structures for the axilla site.
Okay, let's lock that in. For the axilla site, the list from this source is brachial plexus, axillary nerve, axillary artery, axillary vein, lymph nodes. 5 specific names to remember and associate with the armpit area. That list feels pretty logical anatomically, which might actually help with remembering it.
It might, yes. Now, let's move from that specific junction to a much larger, much broader region, the abdomen.
Okay.
The site name in the source is listed rather peculiarly as abdomini structures.
Abdomini structures. Yeah, notice that little dot or bullet point between abdomen and eye. That's exactly how it's written in the source, right?
That's exactly how it appears, abdomini. It's important to be aware of that specific rendering, and the location cues given are sternum, ribs, and pubic symphysis.
So basically outlining the entire abdominal region from top to bottom, front edge anyway.
Pretty much the whole front and sides of the abdomen. And yes, this is indeed a very broad category, abdominal structures. And as you pointed out, that abdomini phrasing is how it shows up in the source. Maybe a typo, maybe intentional, who knows? But that's what you see.
And the list, I imagine it's pretty comprehensive given the area.
It is. The list of cautionary structures associated with this site in the document covers multiple vital organs and the major vessels running through the abdomen.
Okay. This sounds like another one where remembering the entire list is going to be critical, just because it covers such a diverse set of things. What's on the list for abdomini structures?
Here we go. The list includes liver,
Okay.
gallbladder,
Mm-hmm.
abdominal aorta,
The big artery.
inferior vena cava,
It's a big vein.
ovaries,
Okay.
spillawa.
Yeah.
And this one's written with a tilde at that little wavy line over the L.
Spill L. Tilde, so likely meaning spleen, right?
That most certainly means spleen, but the source writes spillo L. You need to know that exact notation.
Got it. Spillatilde. What else?
Then spermatic cords.
Okay. Relevant for male anatomy.
And finally, the Sifrid process.
The little pointy bit at the bottom of the sternum.
That's the one. So that's the full list. 8 items.
8 items for abdomini structures. Wow. Okay, let's go through them again, paying really close attention to the specific phrasing from the source, including those quirks.
Good idea.
Liver, gallbladder, abdominal aorta, inferior vena cava, ovaries, spilloal with the tilde, spermatic cords, Sifrid process.
That's the list, exactly as given in the source for abdomini structures.
All right.
It covers that wide range: vital organs, liver, gallbladder, ovaries, spiels, major midline vessels, abdominal aorta, inferior vena cava, and other specific structures like the spermatic cords and the bony landmark sigmoid process.
Right.
For your exam, you absolutely need to associate all 8 of these names, exactly as listed in the source, with the abdomini structure site.
That is definitely a significant list to memorize and to get the phrasing spot on, especially with SPL. Practice reciting that whole collection when you think of the abdomini structure site. Maybe break it down: organs, vessels, others. Find a system.
Repetition and chunking will be your friends for that one.
Okay.
Moving now from the front to the posterior trunk, the low back and buttocks area.
Okay.
The source groups 2 major regions together here for one single cautionary site name: the lumbar region and gluteal region.
Lumbar region and gluteal region. So low back and butt combined. What are the location cues for that big area?
The cues listed are the 10th rib, which kind of indicates the upper boundary of the lumbar area.
Yes.
Right. And then piriformis, PSIS, and ischial tuberosity.
Ah, key landmarks in the gluteal area. Piriformis muscle, PSIS, that's the posterior superior iliac spine, the back part of the hip bone crest, and the ischial tuberosity, your sit bone.
Exactly. Those cues help map out that large posterior area. So this whole area, low back and glutes, is treated as a single cautionary site in this document.
Okay, and what's the list? What are the cautionary structures provided for this combined lumbar region and gluteal region site?
The list for this combined site is kidneys,
Makes sense. They sit back there.
lumbar plexus,
The nerve network in the low back.
sacrum,
Yep. Base of the spine bone.
osteocaudate
Perfect.
dome.
And the sciatic nerve.
The big one running down the back of the leg starts up here. Okay, so 5 structures. 5 structures. And the source explicitly links the lumbar and gluteal regions under the single site name. And as you said, the structures listed really reflect both areas. You've got the kidneys up higher posteriorly, the lumbar plexus nerve network, the sacrum and coccyx bones, which are key landmarks in the gluteal and pelvic region, and of course the major sciatic nerve, which runs right through there. Right. These 5 specific structures are the ones the source lists for the combined lumbar region and gluteal region site.
Okay, so for the lumbar region and gluteal region, the source tells you to know these 5. Kidneys, lumbar plexus, sacrum, coccyx, the sciatic nerve. 5 specific key structures for this large posterior site grouping. Make sure you can confidently list all 5 for this combined site when prompted.
Exactly. All right, I think that wraps up the trunk sites listed in the source. Ready to move to the limbs. Let's start with the upper limb.
Sounds good. Upper limb it is. Moving down the arm.
We'll move distally, so away from the trunk, focusing on the arm and forearm. There are several specific points of caution listed here in the source.
Okay, where do we start?
Starting on the medial side, the inner side of the upper arm. The source lists the site name, or names actually, as medial brachium.
Brachium. Brachium. Okay, note that parenthetical. So it might just be called the brachium in some context based on this source. Location cue.
The location cue given is ulnar notch.
Ulnar notch. Wasn't that related to the medial epicondyle site we'll get to? Interesting cue for the whole medial brachium. Okay, focusing on the site name. Medial brachium, or just brachium, what structures are listed for this site?
For the medial brachium site, the source lists the specific cautionary structures: ulnar nerve,
Okay.
median nerve, and musculocutaneous nerve.
Just those three nerves.
Just those three nerves are listed here for the medial brachium site.
Okay, so inner side of the upper arm. According to this source, the site is medial brachium, or brachium, and the structures to be cautious of are three key nerves running through that area. The list from the source is simply ulnar nerve, median nerve, musculocutaneous nerve. Straightforward enough. Just know those three nerves go with the medial brachium site name.
Correct.
Yep.
Simple list for that one. Now moving down towards the elbow, focusing on that bony bump on the medial side.
The inner elbow bump.
Exactly. The source lists the site name as medial epicondyle, ulnar notch.
Medial epicondyle, ulnar notch. Ah, there's the ulnar notch again, this time in parentheses as an alternative name for the medial epicondyle itself. What are the location cues?
The location cues listed are ulcranon and ulnar notch. Ulcranon, notice the spelling, O-L-C-C-R-A-N-O-N.
Huh, extra C, usually O-L-E-C-R-A-N-O-N. Good catch. Important to know the source's spelling might be quirky. So, ulcranon process, the point of the elbow, and the ulnar notch nearby.
Right. So down at the elbow, specifically that prominent bony bump on the medial side, the site is named medial epicondyle, with ulnar notch as the alternative name in parentheses. Now, what are the cautionary structures listed specifically for this site in the source?
Okay, what's the list for the medial epicondyle ulnar notch?
For this very specific bony landmark site, the medial epicondyle ulnar notch, the source lists just two cautionary structures.
Oh, only two. Nice.
Only two, they are. Basilic vein
Okay.
and brachia, artery.
Brachia exclamation point.
Yes. B-R-A-C-H-I-A exclamation point. That's how it's written in the source.
Wow. Okay, so almost certainly means brachial artery, but you got to know that exclamation mark is there in the source list.
You absolutely do. Know the source's exact, sometimes strange, phrasing. The key point here is associating these specific two vessels, basilic vein and brachia. Artery, with its exact site, the medial epicondyle, ulnar notch, according to this source document.
Okay, so for the medial epicondyle site, also called the ulnar notch, the source list is short and sweet, if a little quirky. Basilic vein, brachia, artery. Just those two names with the exclamation point to remember for that specific location near the elbow. Easy list, precise location, weird punctuation. Got it.
Perfect. Now let's cross over to the opposite side of the upper arm, the lateral side, the outside.
Okay.
The source lists the lateral brachium as a site.
Lateral brachium, outer upper arm. What's the location cue?
The location cue is anterior to deltoid tuberosity. The deltoid tuberosity is that roughened patch on the humerus bone where your deltoid muscle attaches, about midway down the lateral side. So the cue helps you find that outer aspect of the upper arm.
Okay. Lateral brachium. And what's really interesting here, you hinted earlier, based on this source, what's the list?
This is the fascinating one. For the lateral brachium side, there's only one structure listed.
Just one. Which one?
The source only lists the cephalic vein.
Cephalic vein, that's it.
Just the cephalic vein for the lateral brachium site.
Wow. Okay.
What's fascinating about this entry is that simplicity and specificity. For the lateral brachium site, the source only gives the cephalic vein. Now, anatomically, you might think, wait, aren't there other things there?
Yeah, like nerves or branches.
Right. But for the purpose of your exam, based only on this specific source document, the key is simply recalling that very specific, very short association. Lateral brachium, cephalic vein.
Okay.
It suggests that from the perspective of this source's cautionary list for massage, the cephalic vein is the single most important structure to note in this specific lateral arm area.
Well, that one is a gift for memorization then. Lateral brachium means cephalic vein, one site, one structure. Can't get easier than that. Get that one locked in.
Definitely lock that one in. Okay, now let's move down to the front of the elbow crease.
The cubital fossa area.
Exactly. The source lists the site name as the antecubital area.
Antecubital area. And the location cue is simply anterior elbow. Makes sense.
So, moving into the crease of the elbow, the antecubital area. Now, remember how the notch behind the mandible and the abdominal region had long lists?
Uh-oh. Is this another one?
This is another area with a really significant collection of structures listed in the source.
Yeah.
So yeah, here's where getting the whole list right is absolutely crucial.
Okay, deep breath. Let's hear the list for the antecubital area.
Look at the list provided in the source for the antecubital area site.
Okay.
It includes specific nerves and multiple specific arteries and veins, all packed into this busy region. The cautionary structures listed are median nerve,
Okay.
radial
That's
nerve,
nerves.
then brachia artery, spelled B-R-A-C-H-I-A, closing curly brace.
Another weird one. Brachia curly brace. Likely brachial artery again?
Almost certainly. Again, note the source's exact odd formatting, so brachia artery, then radial artery,
Okay.
ulnar artery.
So 3 arteries listed. Brachia curly brace, radial, ulnar.
Correct. And then 3 veins, median cubital vein, median cephalic vein,
Okay.
and median basilic vein.
Wow. Okay, let's count that. 2 nerves. Median, radial. 3 arteries. Brachia, radial, ulnar. 3 veins. Median cubital, median cephalic, median basilic. That's 8 structures.
8 structures for the antecubital area. It's quite the collection of names to link to that one spot in the elbow crease.
Thinking about why this source might list all of these, well, it's a really superficial area, isn't it? Lots of vessels used for drawing blood, major nerves passing through and dividing right there.
Exactly. Makes sense anatomically why it's a caution zone.
But for safe practice, and specifically for your exam based on this source, you need to know this entire list for this site. Let's list them again very carefully, noting the source's weird phrasing for that artery.
Okay.
Median nerve, radial nerve, brachia artery with the curly brace. Radial artery, ulnar artery, median cubital vein, median cephalic vein, median basilic vein.
That's the list. All 8.
That's definitely another one you'll want to practice reciting repeatedly for the antecubital area. Maybe group them like we just did. 2 nerves, 3 arteries, 3 veins. Find a way that helps you chunk it and remember all 8 for this site.
Good strategy. Okay, almost done with the upper limb. Moving down towards the wrist and hand area now.
Okay.
The source does something interesting here. It groups 2 potential site names together. Anterior wrist and hoku.
Anterior wrist and hoku, so the front of the wrist generally, and also hoku, that specific acupressure point often found in the webbing between the thumb and index finger.
That seems to be the intention, yes.
Yeah.
And the location cues given reflect this. Radius, ulna, carpals, which clearly points to the anterior wrist area,
Right.
and thumb and forefinger metacarpals, which helps locate that hoku point in the hand.
Okay, so the source links the general area of the front of the wrist and that specific hoku point. Do they share the same list of cautionary structures then?
According to this source, yes. They share the exact same list.
Interesting. What's the list?
The source lists both the anterior wrist and the specific point, hoku, as sharing this list of cautionary structures. Radial artery,
Okay.
median nerve,
Mm-hmm.
ulnar artery,
Okay.
ulnar nerve.
Makes sense for the wrist. What else?
And the 5th item is listed as holru, H-O-L-R-U,
Holru, not hoku.
spelled holru in the source document we're using.
Wow. Okay, so maybe a typo for hoku or maybe referring to something slightly different. But the key is the source says holru.
Exactly. You need to know the spelling as it appears in this document. So the source clearly states that identifying either the general anterior wrist area or the specific hoku point requires naming these 5 structures as the cautionary ones, according to this document. Radial artery, median nerve, ulnar artery, ulnar nerve, and holru.
Okay, so whether your examiner points to the front of your wrist generally or asks about the hoku point specifically, the list you need to recall from this source is identical. Radial artery, median nerve, ulnar artery, ulnar nerve, holru. 5 specific structures for that pairing. Get comfortable saying those names together and definitely remember the source's spelling of holru for that last one.
Absolutely critical to note that spelling.
Yeah.
Okay, that finishes the upper limb sites. Ready for the home stretch, the lower limb.
Let's do it. Legs. Working our way down.
We'll cover sites in the legs now, starting up in the thigh and moving down towards the ankle regions.
Okay, where do we start in the leg?
Starting high up in the inner thigh region, the source lists that classic well-known endangerment site, the femoral triangle.
Femoral triangle, yep. Hear about that one a lot. What are the location cues listed?
The location cues are sartorius, adductor longus, and inguinal ligament.
The anatomical borders. Those 3 structures literally form the triangle shape. But sticking to our mission today.
Exactly. We're ignoring the borders themselves and focusing only on the structures listed as cautionary within that triangle, according to the source.
Right. So what's the list for the femoral triangle?
For the femoral triangle, the source lists the following cautionary structures: femoral artery,
Okay.
femoral vein,
Mm-hmm.
femoral nerve.
The big three. Artery, vein, nerve, all named femoral. Easy start.
Yes. Then it adds the greater saphenous vein,
Okay, that large superficial vein.
and finally lymph nodes.
Lymph nodes, again, common in these transition areas. So that's 5 structures total for the femoral triangle.
5 structures. And this list, as you noted, is very anatomically logical for this area. You've got the main femoral vessels, artery and vein, and the major femoral nerve, all passing right through this triangle superficially.
Right.
The source specifically includes the greater saphenous vein and lymph nodes, which are also concentrated in that inguinal area within the triangle. This collection of 5 structures, exactly as listed in this source, defines the cautionary list for the femoral triangle site for your exam.
Okay, so for the femoral triangle site, the list you need is femoral artery, femoral vein, femoral nerve, greater saphenous vein, lymph nodes. Practice knowing those 5 names together and associating them directly with the femoral triangle location.
Perfect. Now let's move around to the back of the knee.
Back of the knee, popliteal space.
Exactly. The source lists the site as the popliteal fossa.
Popliteal fossa. What are the location cues?
The location cues listed are biceps femoris and gastrocnemius. These are major muscles, hamstring and calf muscle respectively, that form the upper and lower boundaries of that diamond-shaped space at the back of the knee.
Okay, helps frame the area. So for the popliteal fossa, what structures are listed as cautionary in our source?
Similar pattern to the femoral triangle, actually.
Mm.
The popliteal fossa site lists the main vessels and nerves running through this posterior knee area. The cautionary structures listed are popliteal artery,
Okay.
popliteal vein,
Artery and vein, name for the area.
tibial nerve,
Ah.
and common fibular nerve. And this is important. The source provides peroneal nerve, in parentheses, right after common fibular nerve.
Ah, so like with Hokuhoru, kind of, but here it's giving an alternative, very common name. Common fibular nerve, also known as peroneal nerve. Need to know both.
Based on the source listing it that way, yes. You should note that the source lists common fibular nerve, peroneal nerve. So be prepared to potentially use either name or list it exactly like that.
Got it. So for the popliteal fossa site, the source lists the main popliteal artery and popliteal vein, and then those 2 key nerves branching through the area. The tibial nerve and the common fibular nerve, making sure you know the alternative name, peroneal nerve, as provided. That's 4 structures in total.
4 structures, exactly. For the popliteal fossa site, the list is popliteal artery, popliteal vein, tibial nerve, common fibular nerve, peroneal nerve. Make sure you know both names for that last nerve as given in the source document. This list, again, makes pretty strong anatomical sense, which might help with recall.
Okay, 2 more site groupings left, right? And they seem to link bony landmarks with reflex zones.
That's right. The next one listed in the source links a bony landmark on the lower leg with a specific reflex zone, grouping them under one cautionary site name: medial tibia and uterine reflex zone.
Medial tibia and uterine reflex zone. Okay, medial tibia is the inner shin bone. Uterine reflex zone implies points along there related to the uterus. What are the location cues?
The cues are knee, likely referencing the upper part of the medial tibia area, and ankle, suggesting the zone runs along the medial side of the lower leg, somewhere between the knee and ankle where these points might be found.
Okay, so this site grouping, medial tibia and uterine reflex zone, explicitly links the shin bone area with this reflex zone concept. What cautionary structures are listed for both of these sites together?
According to the source, the list for this combined site is tibial nerve.
Tibial nerve again, it was in the popliteal fossa list.
It was. Then greater saphenous vein.
That one again too, it was listed for the femoral triangle.
Correct. Good recall. And the third item is listed simply as uterine points.
Uterine points, just like that.
Just like that, uterine points, as listed in the source. So the source explicitly connects both the bony landmark area along the shin and this specific reflex zone to this single list of 3 structures: tibial nerve, greater saphenous vein, and uterine points.
Interesting. It suggests that if you're working anywhere along that medial shin, or specifically on points designated within this reflex zone, You need to be mindful of these three things according to this source.
That seems to be the implication based on the listing.
Okay, so whether the focus is the medial tibia region itself or the uterine reflex zone points located there, the source provides the same list of cautionary structures. Tibial nerve, greater saphenous vein, uterine points. Three specific names to remember for that grouping along the medial aspect of the lower leg. And note that specific phrasing, uterine points, as it appears in the source.
Exactly. And that brings us to the final site grouping listed in the source document.
The last one. Let's finish strong.
This one is posterior fibular bead and ovarian reftex zone.
Okay, wait. Posterior fibular bead, not head. B-E-A.
Yes, B-E-A-D. That's how it's written in the source. Posterior fibular bead.
Another source quirk.
Okay.
And ovarian reftex zone. R-E-F-T-E-X, not reflex.
Correct. R-E-F-T-E-X.
Yeah.
Ovarian reftex zone. Again, you need to know these exact spellings from the source.
Wow. Okay, so posterior fibular bead and ovarian reftex zone. What are the location cues for this pairing?
The cues are knee, referencing the area near the head, or bead of the fibula, which is on the lateral side near the knee, and ankle, suggesting this zone runs somewhere along the posterior lateral aspect of the lower leg.
Got it. So similar to the last one, this site grouping links a bony landmark of the posterior fibular head, but written as bead, with the ovarian reflex zone, written as reftex zone. According to this source, what's the shared list of cautionary structures for this pairing? Is it short?
It's very short, just two structures listed.
Oh, good. What are they?
For the posterior fibular bead and ovarian reftex zone site grouping, the source lists the cautionary structures as common fibular nerve, peroneal nerve.
Ah, that nerve again.
Okay.
It was in the popliteal fossa list. Makes sense. It wraps around the fibular head bead area. And again, listing both names.
Yes, listing both names again is key. And the second structure is listed simply as ovarian points.
Ovarian points, similar to uterine points on the other side.
Exactly. So the source explicitly links both the bony landmark area near the fibular head bead and this ovarian reflex reftex zone to this very short specific list. Common fibular nerve, peroneal nerve, and ovarian points.
Okay. And that wraps up the entire list from the source, right? All 17 sites or groupings.
That's all of them, from occipital region down to here.
So the final site grouping, posterior fibular bead and ovarian reftex zone, remembering those spellings. The list you need to know is just two things: common fibular nerve, peroneal nerve, and ovarian points. Make sure you can recite both names for that nerve as provided in the source document and know the specific phrasing, ovarian points, and the site name spellings.
Perfect. We've now systematically walked through all 17 distinct sites or site groupings listed in the specific source document we focused on today. From the back of the head, through the neck, trunk, upper limbs, and down through the lower limbs to these ankle area sites.
Right. And let's just circle back and really emphasize the purpose of this deep dive again. It wasn't about giving you a full, comprehensive anatomy lecture, was it?
Not at all. The goal was very specific. To dissect this particular source list and extract precisely what it tells you for each entry.
Which is?
The name of the site or location exactly as listed in the document, sometimes with quirky spellings or punctuations. And the specific names of the cautionary structures listed directly underneath or next to that site in that same document. Nothing more, nothing less.
That strict focus is so important because for your practical exam, the task is usually very clear and very specific, right?
Exactly. Identify the site as the examiner prompts you. Maybe they say the name, maybe they point, and then you need to list these exact structures provided in this source list for that specific site.
There's a clear right answer defined within the source itself for each site listed.
That's the key takeaway. Your broader anatomical understanding is foundational, of course. It helps things make sense. But for this specific exam task, your ability to recall this specific document's list is what's being tested.
Precisely. Your job is recall and association based purely on this specific document. So how do you master this for the exam?
Repetition, repetition, repetition.
That's it. Go back through the sites we've just discussed. Practice saying the site name out loud. Occipital region, notch, posterior to the ramus of mandible, femoral triangle, antecubital area, posterior fibular bead, whatever it is.
It's the name.
And then immediately list the structures associated with it from this source. Try it right now. Maybe pick one. Occipital region.
Okay, equals occipital ridge, vertebral artery, spinous process, greater occipital nerve.
Good. Femoral triangle.
Equals femoral artery, femoral vein, femoral nerve, greater saphenous vein, lymph nodes.
Nice. Antecubital area.
Equals median nerve, radial nerve, bronchial artery, radial artery, ulnar artery, median cubital vein, median cephalic vein, median basilic vein. Remembering that curly brace.
Yes. Do it out loud again and again. Record yourself, maybe. Use flashcards, whatever works for you. But practice it just like you'll need to do it for your examiner.
You've now taken a really focused deep dive into the specific source material that defines these cautionary sites for your practical exam. You have the authoritative list from that document.
Right.
And honestly, knowing just the site name as it's written and being able to confidently recite the list of structures provided for it, that is the crucial step towards feeling confident in that high-pressure exam moment.
It really is. It kind of bypasses the need to make complex anatomical judgments on the spot, doesn't it?
It does. It allows you to rely on the specific information you've been given, the information you've memorized from this source.
It truly is about mastering this list. Knowing this specific document's list, with all its particular groupings, its unique spellings like B or reftex or holru, its weird punctuation like brachia or brachia, knowing that is what prepares you for this particular test. So as you review all this, what stands out to you from going through this list as particularly important to maybe double down on reviewing and practicing reciting?
Well, I think you hit on some key ones. Those sites with the longer lists definitely need practice, like the notch posterior to the ramus of mandible with 7 structures.
Right.
Or the antecubital area and the abdomini structures, both with 8. Getting all of those correct under pressure takes work.
For sure. Any others?
And maybe those sites with the slightly unusual names or groupings, like you mentioned, the abdominal structure site itself, and then definitely those last 2 pairings linked to the reflex reftex zones.
Yeah, the medial tibia and uterine reflex zone and the posterior fibular bead and ovarian reftex zone.
Those less intuitively anatomical groupings might require more focused rote memorization, because the logic isn't just about pure anatomy. It's about how this source chose to group them with specific points or zones.
Good point. So focus on the long lists and the weird ones.
Practice makes perfect, or at least proficient, with lists like these. Confident recall really comes from that repeated association. Site name links to this specific list of structures, exactly as written in the source. It's a direct test of your preparation based on this material.
Absolutely. You've done the hard work by going through this source with us today. Now it's really about that active recall, that repetition. Keep practicing.
We really hope this focused deep dive into the potential caution sites based specifically on this source document has been helpful for you as you prepare for your massage practical exam.
Keep revisiting these specific lists. Site name, structure list, site name, structure list. That focused active recall practice is honestly your secret weapon for this part of the exam.
We wish you the very, very best of luck with your ongoing studies and, of course, with your practical exams when the time comes.
You've got this. We'll see you on the next deep dive.